It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Roy Spencer.
Thank you, James, but as I like to announce whenever I'm here, if ExxonMobil is listening, the bank routing number is 215, because I'm still waiting. Patrick Moore yesterday morning stole a lot of my thunder, because one of the things I've learned from doing research for the last 25 or so years is that you really can't prove anything in science. We come up with theories of how things might work. And I thought Patrick Moore did an amazing job. I mean for a 1960s nuclear test protesting, whale ship stopping, baby seal saving, long-haired hippie freak, the guy really understands the limitations of science, and boy, are there limitations in the climate realm. You know, too many people think that, science, all areas of science are created equal, and that, scientists objectively look for the answers, and no, I mean, there's two kinds of scientists, male and female. Other than that, they're the same as everybody else. In fact, in many instances, more biased than your average person. Usually when I give a talk, afterwards I get complaints. You lost me after your first slide. So today I'm going to give the least technical talk I've ever given, probably since the 6th grade, or the last time I did Senate testimony, because that's basically, it's the... So the title of my talk is, What Do We Really Know About Global Warming? Let's see, I think I've got control of this. Also, what do you think of Vegas, huh? Boy, am I glad I don't live here. How many people got enough sleep last night? Okay, that's 3%, okay. And what's cool is that as far as a conference goes, usually I'm with just all scientists, and we're a fairly stodgy group, but we got a lot of people here that are like myself, are guitarists. I think we could form a band. Let's see, we got Craig Rucker, who's a guitarist, and Marlo Lewis and Willis Essenbach. So I suggest that for the next Heartland conference, that your entertainment be provided by Willis and the Deniers. Yeah. Okay, what do we really know about global warming? Well, what do I mean by global warming? We kind of have to define terms because to some people, well, to me, global warming just means warming for whatever reason, and of course, to the public, it means, man-caused global warming. But I'll tell you what I don't mean. I don't mean man-made global warming where it's M-A-N-N, okay, which the hockey stick, I'm not talking about that kind of man-made global warming. John Christy was on the National Academy's committee that examined Michael Mann's hockey stick. And no matter what you hear about out of that committee in terms of the official pronouncements, which kind of tried to protect Michael Mann's reputation, John Christy says that, that there was really serious reservations about what he had done, the statistical over-manipulation of the data. So I'm not talking about that kind of man-made warming. I'm also not talking about this kind of man-made warming, which Anthony Watts has done a fantastic job at revealing over the years. All of these, yes, Anthony. Anthony has been a wonderful resource for all of us. He has single-handedly forced NOAA to go back and take a look at the siting of some of these thermometers, because a lot of us still think that a lot of the warming we're seeing in the thermometer record is just urban heat island effect. In fact, Las Vegas here, even though it's built in the desert, basically, I don't know why people do that, build cities in the desert, but in the last 40 years or so, nighttime temperatures here have risen by 10 degrees Fahrenheit because of urbanization. This is an effect that they can't take out of the thermometer record, okay? Their algorithms cannot take it out because you can't separate it from global warming. If you've got a long-term warming trend because of urbanization, there's no way NOAA can take out that effect because it's indistinguishable. So Anthony's been doing a really good job. And I'm not talking about that man-made global warming either, which is just localized. When I say global warming, I mean the recent probable increase in global average surface temperature on multi-decadal timescales. So just defining terms. Okay, so after working on global warming for the last 20 plus years, what do we know about it now? And this is a common theme among scientists, especially us gray hairs, that the longer you go, it's like the more you get more questions than you get answers. So what do we really know about it? Almost nothing. Although Bill Gray tried to convince me yesterday he has all the answers. But yeah, I can't say that. Maybe if I live to be his age, I'll have all the answers too. Anyway, we really don't know how strong global warming is, what it's caused by, whether it makes severe weather worse, when it started, when it will end, whether it's good or bad. Now, we do know it might be caused by some combination of human activity and Mother Nature. And, you know, I have to admit, adding CO2 to the atmosphere should cause some warming, but I think it's entirely open to question how much. And how much warming we're going to get from adding CO2 to the atmosphere makes all the difference. Makes a difference between Al Gore's Armageddon and, who cares, it's probably a beneficial thing. Now, why would I say it might be some combination of human activities and Mother Nature? I mean, aren't those the only two possibilities? Well, no, as I showed on my blog, I went back and looked at the number of UFO reports while the oceans have warmed, and the correlation is like 0.95. So, one of the theories is we've had extraterrestrials coming here and secretly pumping energy into the oceans for the last 50 years, which have raised the average ocean temperature by hundredths of a degree in the last 50 years. I don't know what their purpose is, but, so it might not be just humans and Mother Nature. Maybe it's aliens, who knows? Okay, I like this graph. It shows that nearly every century might experience global warming or cooling. This is a relatively recent summary of proxy evidence of past temperatures. I like it because it goes back 2,000 years and covers the Roman warm period. And basically it shows Roman warm period was just as warm, within the era of the measurements, as it is today. I'm not sure whether that could have been because of how they powered their chariots. I suppose that's possible. And then the medieval warm period, we know that was warm historically. Just based on historical records. Farming in Greenland, you got to be kidding. And then the Vikings finally got forced out after 100 or so years. We have historical records of that. Climate changes naturally, and just about every century in the last 2,000 years, if you look at it, that the proxy records had global warming or cooling. Okay? Now this is a graph that we came up with, John Christy and myself, that turned out to be much more popular than we ever imagined it would be. And it's just a straight comparison between the climate models, which almost universally, in fact, from what Pat Michaels said yesterday, universally produce too much warming. Over 100 climate models, and they produce too much warming compared to the observations, whether you're talking about surface temperatures from thermometers or our satellite data. There's a huge disconnect between the two. Now, what is astounding to me is that, and I come from a weather forecasting background, okay? We use computer models for weather forecasting. They work very successfully on a time scale of 1 to 2 days in advance. They're just marvels to me. They're almost magical. And we test them. We test, Twice a day there are forecasts made, and then the weather forecast centers around the world do statistics of how well they've done. Climate models are not even forecasting. Those curves you see on that chart, those are hindcasts. They already knew what the answer was. They already knew how much warming there was, and they still can't get the climate models to produce that little bit of warming. Now, you tell me the climate models can be believed for policymaking? You've got to be kidding. And that's for global conditions, global average temperatures. Here's some regional conditions. This is over the Corn Belt because I'm interested in the Corn Belt because I consult with corn growing interests regarding the coming growing season. In fact, what's great about these guys is, long-range forecasting has almost zero skill. Okay, it's just the way it is. But still, growers need forecasts, long-range forecasts, for planning purposes. Okay, give us something. It's kind of like, forecasting how many hurricanes there are going to be this year. Just give us something. And what's really cool about working for them is I go there and they pay me to say, we have no clue what your next growing season is going to be like. And they're like, hey, that's awesome. Because they're so tired of all the experts coming in and saying, the growing season is going to be unusually cool and wet, or no, it's going to be hot and dry, and of course, you're right half the time if you've got two chances. So, you're batting 50%. Hey, that's pretty good. And they love just having somebody new coming in and saying, hey, we don't have a clue. But anyway, this is a comparison over the Corn Belt of observed temperatures, which is that black line. I mean, look at the 1930s, during the Dust Bowl days of the 1930s. And then that red line is the average of 42 climate models for the same area, okay? And basically, there's no comparison. The climate models can't explain the warmth of the 1930s. It's probably tied to changes in ocean circulation, and the climate models are just lousy with natural variations in the ocean. But look what's happened recently since about 1990 is the models have just tremendous amount of warming. This is averaged over all the climate models I could find at the KNMI website, the Climate Explorer website out of Denmark, I think. And the observations just haven't done it. There's been almost no observed warming over the Corn Belt. And yet the models insist it must be warming. And I think that's why we see the IPCC now starting to hint in the reports that, maybe we shouldn't even trust the observations. Let's just trust the models. Okay. Okay, what else don't we know or do we know about global warming? Well, we don't know whether it's causing worse drought conditions. Probably not. This Proxy record based on tree rings from Ed Cook, who's like the godfather of tree ring research in the world. We had some mega droughts in the western United States in centuries past, and there's long-term climate change in that plot right there that goes over the last 1,200 years. In fact, looks like the last 400 or 500 years have been unusually wet in the western U.S. But if we go back to a dry period, they'll blame that on global warming, of course, rather than nature, which obviously had a major hand in what happened 1,000 years ago. Okay, we don't know whether global warming is causing worse tornadoes. Apparently not. If anything, the strong tornado reports have gone down over time since the 1950s. In fact, we're near record low levels of tornado activity in the United States. We've already seen this plot before from Ryan Maui at Weather Bell, who monitors the global tropical cyclone activity. We all freaked out in 2005, right? Because there were a lot of hurricanes and an awful lot of them hit the United States. It was absolutely amazing. And then the bottom fell out. And it's been since 2005, almost 10 years, 9 years, since we've had a major hurricane hit the United States. Who would have forecasted that? I mean, nature continually surprises us. Okay, we don't know whether global warming is causing less snow cover. Apparently not. This chart shows basically no long-term trend, although there are large year-to-year variations, which of course are due to global warming. More snow is, global warming. Less snow is global warming. It's all global warming. How about snowstorms, individual snowstorms? Well, here's one. 2 feet of snow in New York City, 1947. Obviously not our fault. Way back then, we hadn't emitted much yet in the way of carbon dioxide emissions. Speaking of carbon dioxide emissions, my lovely wife, Renee, who came with me finally to the first conference, she knows a lot of you people. She reads your blogs. We sat in an airplane for 2 hours in Houston. It was stuffy. And I had always wanted to bring my CO2 meter. I carry a CO2 meter around with me. How geeky is that? And I forgot, it's in the hotel room. I forgot to bring it in the meeting room because I wanted to see what the CO2 levels were in here. We talk about maybe someday CO2 might reach 2x, 2 times what it used to be 100 years ago. Well, for 2 hours, my CO2 meter said we were sitting in 4x CO2. So I was holding the CO2 meter up to the air intake, because I was curious how much of this air is fresh air versus recirculated air in the airplane, The lady next to me looks over, what are you doing? Well, I'm measuring the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Well, what does it say? Well, it's pretty high. She starts going, I said, no, it's, from what I read, this level of CO2 is enough to where it might make you feel a little drowsy or like not very clear, but it's not dangerous. And she's, okay. All right, but I digress. Anyway, global warming is going to destroy agricultural productivity, right? That's what we keep hearing. Okay, well, these guys, these grain people that I work with, CO2 and climate change isn't even on their radar screen. And the main thing that they do is long-term forecasting of crop yields. And these are plots since 1960 of the increase in crop yields. Now, this is yield, so that's per acre productivity. It isn't affected by planting more acreage. It's just the productivity per acre. The crop yields from that top line is corn. These are the main global grain crops. Corn and wheat and soybeans, okay? And there has been a steady increase in productivity by a factor of, since 1960, 3 to 5, something like that, increase in grain productivity? I mean, could Paul Ehrlich have been more wrong in the population bomb? Good grief. And there's no sign of global warming hurting productivity yet. I already showed you the graph of the Midwest U.S. The models say it should be warming. It isn't. And a little warming probably isn't going to hurt. Most of the productivity is just because of the ingenuity of mankind. Improved farming practices, especially, new hybridized seeds, more drought tolerance and all of that. Humans are pretty smart about becoming more productive if they want to be. So there's no sign of global warming or climate change yet in agricultural productivity. But the IPCC, which seems to be immune from facts, continue to insist, that global warming is hurting our crops, blah, 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 when there's really no observational evidence for it. They are more and more in the realm of theory, which is increasingly divorced from observation, from the real world. This is really cool. I like this plot. It's been known, there's been several papers written in the last 10 years about global greening, that the Earth is greening up. And these researchers in Australia came up with this plot of which regions of the Earth are greening the most. And they tried to subtract out the effects of changes in weather, trying to get more at the CO2 effect. CO2 is plant food. As Patrick Moore mentioned, it's necessary for life on Earth. We're putting more of it in the atmosphere. And you see here, especially the semi-arid areas like the Sahel region and Africa, more vegetation because of more plant food. In other words, to some extent, plants on Earth, life on Earth, has been starved for CO2. I tell people, the way I express it is I think life on Earth is sucking on CO2 as hard as it can, and now life is breathing easier because we're putting CO2 into the atmosphere. The idea that everything humans do hurts nature is a religious view. It isn't necessarily true. Okay. We do know that even if we are at fault, there's not much we can do about it anyway. Not without stopping most economic activity and killing at least hundreds of millions of people in the world. I love this plot by Bjorn Lomborg, showing how, 200 years ago, of course, all we had was renewable energy, a lot of people burning wood and all of that. Then we've gone to fossil fuels, but even the most optimistic projections by 2035 is that we're not going to have more than maybe 15% renewables. The energy demand by humanity is just too large. You can't stop using fossil fuels without killing people. Okay. We do know that the public is losing interest in climate. I did this, I used a Google tool to look at Google Trends, how searches in Google have changed over the years. In the last 10 years, increase in interest in weather, decrease in interest in climate. Finally, we know that the cause of warming, as I've mentioned, carbon dioxide, is necessary for life on Earth. We know that nature gobbles up half of what we produce. Just as quickly as we produce it, nature gobbles it up, loves it. Given all this evidence, why aren't scientists advocating producing more carbon dioxide? It makes no sense to me. Scientists are supposed to be objective, look at all possibilities. They never look at this possibility. Well, some of us do, right? Craig Idso does, because he's an expert in this stuff. Well, dramatic pause, because I've never said this before. The reason why more scientists don't advocate putting more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is because the driving force behind the global warming debate, I hate to say it, isn't science. Thank you.